Well, Mr. Miz here, down along the Fort Wayne line again, hanging out to see if any trains happen to go by, and as is often the case, there's not really anything coming. So, in the meantime, figured I'd kind of hang out and just bloviate a bit about what's on my mind. And today, what is on my mind, aside from looking at the cows over there on the hill, which you probably can barely see because my camera ain't all that great, but what's on my mind today is gun control. This turns up every election or after every mass shooting, and you hear calls for gun control, and then you'll hear arguments against it. And one of the things that I've noticed that so often gets overlooked is that there's a fundamental assumption behind gun control, behind the logic, and if I wasn't holding a camera, I'd be doing air quotes around the word logic, that underlies gun control. It's a flawed premise at its heart. It's an inferred if-then relationship that sounds like it could potentially work in theory, but that we find does not work out very well in fact. And that is this. If the government restricts or eliminates the legal traffic in firearms, so the argument goes, then you will have a reduction in gun-related criminality, gun crime, gun fatalities, etc. So here's the problem with this logic, is that it's essentially a prohibitionist argument. If the government eliminates or restricts the illegal traffic in alcohol, then we'll have less drunks and less, alcohol-related crime. That's the logic that went into the Volstead Act that brought about prohibition. What ended up happening in prohibition? Well, if you didn't bother to study U.S. history at all and don't know the answer, I'll tell you. It created a massive underground market for alcohol because people who drank didn't just stop because the law told them to. It also led from the mafia becoming just, kind of small-time hoods who were running numbers rackets and prostitution rings and such to becoming criminal enterprises on par with the largest businesses in the country at the time. They also tended to corrupt local law enforcement, judges, and all manner of government. Alcoholism didn't improve. It got worse. The government lost out on a lot of money, and in point of fact, interestingly enough, a necessary precondition for them to ban alcohol was to pass the income tax, because that's where the federal government got most of its money. Immediately prior to the Volstead Act was taxing booze. So you can thank those people for your income taxes. The war on drugs, there's another fun one. Let's go through that, shall we? Back, when Nixon was president, I think, they declared, the war on drugs. How's that worked out? Not particularly well, to the best of my knowledge anyway. It's not like it's hard to get drugs in this country. Meanwhile, you have all these cartels in Mexico. We're making the Chinese rich because they're smuggling in fentanyl. And Americans are dying at a rate higher than ever from drugs. See, the problem is, just because you pass a law doesn't mean that people are going to obey it. That's why we have law enforcement. If you look at the word enforcement, the root word in the term enforcement is force. You have to impose force. That's how the law works. It's the threat of force. Well, guess what? The threat of force isn't always good enough. There are going to be people out there who are going to break the law because they think they can get away with it or they just don't care. And I mean, what's truly hilarious is a lot of these people that want to talk about banning guns, the penalties for banning guns that they're talking about are less than the penalties that you're going to have if you commit crimes with a gun. And there's not a shortage of crimes you can commit with a gun. Armed robbery, terroristic threats, attempted murder. These, at least in states that actually take the law seriously, tend to have pretty heavy penalties, far worse than you would get for just simply possessing a gun illegally, especially if you didn't have a prior criminal record. And really, that's the other problem with these type of prohibitionary laws. It doesn't solve the problem. It just creates more criminals. Of course, maybe that's what they want. You know, it's a lot easier to control a population when, you know, they can immediately bring down the hammer and put you in jail on some trumped up bullshit charge, doesn't it? Anyways, that's my thought though. So in summary, yeah, gun control won't work. The initial premise behind it is flawed. It doesn't work. It's never worked, and it never will work. And realistically, if you did try to ban guns, the most likely thing you would have is a civil war. And, you know, I don't particularly want that, but, you know, would I be willing to fight for my right to protect myself against some, you know, jackbooted housefrows who don't think I should have it? Yeah, and I'm not the only one out there who would. Anyways, hope it didn't bore you too much. Still no trains, as expected. Have a good one.